Welcome to the Deploy Securely podcast, where we go deep on the cybersecurity, privacy, and compliance implications of using AI. I'm Walter Haydock, the founder of StackAware, and I'm joined by Steve Dufour, Chief Security and Privacy Officer at Embold Health. Steve, Happy New Year.
Hey, happy New Year, man. How we doing?
Great, great, great. Holidays treat you all right?
Oh yeah, like it was very chill and relaxing. Worked in the shed most of the time, so got a lot of
That's good.
housework done.
That's good. Yeah, I shared my non-relaxing holidays with you, but everything's fine, and just stuff to be expected with a young child. But good to be with you in 2026. So you wanted to share some of your experiences with the audience, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so one of the things Alex and I, so Alex is my direct report at Embold Health in the security and privacy department, and one of the things we're doing, which is an ongoing task really, we review controls, update them. So we're upgrading our high trust version to I think 11.6 or something like that in September. So some of our controls have changed, and so have our mappings. So I wanted to go back to HIPAA and grab all of those section numbers and insert those in the database to map to our processes or our products and basically show what controls we're actually adhering to. So couldn't find on the internet a CSV of anything, and I already had some of this information, but it wasn't exactly clear what the requirement was. So I can actually share my screen and give everybody a lowdown on exactly what we were doing. So this isn't the exact requirement, but it's a really good example. So let's say this is my requirement. Report to the covered entity any security incident, blah, 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 right? So the full section number is 164.314A to C, right? So that's what I have in my database to reference. I was trying to use large language models to parse either the HTML, the XML, Notepad, or a PDF because I tried all of these different things, even directly on the live website to grab this for me. That's all I wanted. That was phase one, right? And ChatGPT just couldn't do it at all. So uh, spent many hours trying to get ChatGPT because I was also trying to train its thinking at the same time. Thinking. um, Trying to train its output and the process that it would follow, right? Like first find this, right? It should be this format, right? Like it might be like heading 3 or something like that. And parse all the way down until you get to this full section number and kind of like double check your work, right? And it just couldn't do it. Like it might be able to do one, correct its behavior, but then the very next one it couldn't do it. And the reason for that is because throughout all of this that it parses through, there are references. So you can see here, there is another reference here. So by feeding it a section number here, forcing it to parse all the way through this, it has no idea what's a beginning and end of any of it. Even if it's in XML like formatted text, right? Like here's the paragraph, here's the heading, whatever it happens to be, it just couldn't do it. The second part of the exercise was going to be okay, this all by itself doesn't provide enough context to actually know who should do it and when or why, right? So C, go all the way back up, business associate contracts that gives a little bit more context to the requirement, implementation specification, and organizational requirements. That all concatenated together will give you that specific section number, the full context. That way you don't have to reference anything else. It's just all by itself. Here's what I need to adhere to and move on. So I ended up, I want to say maybe 10 and a half hours of working with ChatGPT to do this exercise out of all the 248 HIPAA related section numbers that I wanted to document. I ended up doing it manually. Manual copy and paste. Here's all my section numbers in an Excel sheet. Open up Notepad in another window. Copy and paste until I'm satisfied. Copy and paste that into Excel and just move on to the next one. And then And then I use ChatGPT with all those section numbers and all the text to create the insert statements to go into the database, right? So like it was good for one thing and one thing only. It got confused otherwise.
Yeah, I definitely hear you on that. So I've been doing a lot of heavy duty data crunching myself, and I found that the most effective thing for me is to use ChatGPT to write Excel or Google Sheets formulas or
Yep.
SQL statements or code, even like Python code, and then use that to parse the data because you want that to be deterministic. You want the outputs to be the same every time. So I find that to be the most effective route. And as we were discussing, that's what Stack Aware does. We chop up a lot of these regulatory requirements into actionable tasks that you can turn into controls for ISO 42001 or whatever your regulatory or compliance requirements are. So, yeah, I hear you on that, and good to see you fighting the good fight. Well, cool. You want to move on to talk Waymo?
Yeah, go for it. What's going on with Waymo?
Yeah, so in late December, I'll pull up my screen here. In late December, Waymo, the autonomous vehicle company, was having some problems where their cars were getting stuck in the middle of the road because there was a power outage in San Francisco. So I did a little digging on this and went to the blog post that Waymo put out. It had a little more detail. And it's interesting because they have the ability to handle dark traffic signals. So if a stoplight goes out, they have the ability to handle that. But it will occasionally request confirmation check to make sure it makes the safest choice. So this implies that there's some sort of human in the loop saying, hey, which thing should I do if I see a dark traffic signal? And interestingly enough, they had successfully traversed more than 7,000 signals, but there was a concentrated spike in the requests. So they're not saying this, but it sounds like there are actually humans in the loop that were the failure point here, interestingly enough. So, obviously we'd love to hear more from Waymo about this, but I think that's an interesting situation and interesting potential lesson learned. What do you think?
Oh yeah, that I mean, like it's really good that they have the human in the loop portion of it, and at the same time, um, yeah, getting overwhelmed. I wonder where their call center was that actually got overwhelmed. So if it was in San Francisco, they were with power or without power. So like maybe it was like an offshore team or even a nearby city. Like were all those calls routed somewhere else? So I like that idea, and it's just like one of those situations that it's really good for risk assessments, right? Where you say like, what would happen if, and if this particular call center gets overwhelmed with requests, can we route half of those over to another call center that to kind of spread the load? Like it's load balancer, right? Like too many requests coming to one endpoint, let's reroute them to something else. That way we can continue things going. Yeah, that's really interesting. I would. Can we tag Waymo in there, and maybe they can come on the next talk to talk about exactly what happened?
we can. I'll see what happens, but yeah, definitely we can mention them and see if they're interested in telling us what's up.
Oh, how cool is this? We got the public chat.
I know.
Crystal joined. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
talking about Waymo. Uh,
interesting. Her last name is similar to yours. Is there
oh,
some relationship there?
hey babe, thanks for the support.
Hey, well, it's good to have the family in here as well. So great, great having you contribute, Crystal.
Yeah, so if you were, let's say, the CISO or the AI risk person at Waymo, what might you do differently? Because I already said like basically load balancers spread the load if to influx of calls comes into one data center through one line, do all that others. Do you agree that that might be a good approach to take, or would you default to something like the vehicle stuck at the light will pull over to like a like a side road or something like that until told to do otherwise. Like, is there a better default behavior in your opinion?
I think it depends. Specifically with respect to autonomous vehicles, if you have a situation where the vehicle is not sure what the safest thing to do is, it makes sense to request the human escalation on its own. But in a situation like this, where there are a huge wave of escalations going on at once, that could actually make it more dangerous because the vehicles were just frozen in place while they were waiting for the input. So I would say if I were the chief AI risk officer at Waymo, I would look at the threshold for escalation and model that against this type of outage scenario and make sure that it's not safer to let some decisions happen autonomously and then only escalate a certain percentage, a smaller percentage than they did in this case, to make sure that they're not bombarding their call centers. Now, it might be the case that the right move was to escalate in all these 7,000 situations, but it might have been the case that some of these were really easy and they could improve their algorithms to handle them autonomously without bombarding the humans.
And I wonder if an if then statement might, because you brought up a good point, they were just stuck there, not moving. And rightfully so, that's what they were, programmed to do, wait until orders come. So I wonder if there's anything written in their code because, like, even in this article, I don't think they said like emergency vehicles, and you kind of implied it earlier. Just them being present in the middle of an intersection can cause more harm than good, right? Like, they're not just sitting there, they're actually blocking traffic. So I wonder if they could do something like an if then statement in some of their programming or some of their decision making where it's got, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure it has cameras 360. That way it can be completely aware of everything around it. So if you see emergency vehicle approaching you from behind, get out of the way to not impede the risk potentially to human life.
Yeah, this gets into the sticky topic of AI ethics, which I would say is actually just ethics with a discussion about the technological implementation, but you certainly would need to make some decisions about which is higher priority, whether it's an ambulance coming through or a police car coming through, and you need to make decisions about that ahead of time rather than doing it on the fly, because obviously doing it on the fly failed here.
Yep, agreed.
All right, you want to take the next one?
What's the next one? I always forget.
The next one is the AI generated police reports.
Oh, jeez. Oh, here we go. Pretty sure Crystal sent me over this one. Add that to the chat there, and I'll also share my screen. It's really funny because people. Well, I'll do some commentary first. People are so worried about jobs at some point. Right, and rightfully so. Like somebody coming in, and even an uninformed manager, director, or executive thinking like, "Oh, we have AI now. Let's just go ahead and like replace workforces." Right? They think it's just this instant thing, and I have a feeling that this article I'm about to show over here is an example of that, where somebody implemented a technology to help save time and potentially check for accuracy, right? As well, basically multiple levels, and it was being used, I guess, too independently of any type of not governance, but like second set of eyes. Where in this particular scenario, there was automated transcription of video during a police encounter, and during the transcription process, the AI couldn't differentiate between what was on TV, what was in real life, and the reality potentially of a police officer changing into a frog. Like it sounds ridiculous, but this really happened, right? To where it doesn't make any sense. So one, that happened, and two, nobody caught it, right? So that's this over dependence upon technology as opposed to your critical one, your critical thinking skills, right? And then two, you just did it not cross their mind? Did somebody not follow procedure? Whatever it happens to be, and somebody had to actually explain what happened here and say like, "Hey, I messed up. I didn't follow procedure." Or worst case scenario, I didn't know that I needed to do that, which means somebody implemented a technology with possible negative outcomes and didn't do any due diligence for testing, training their people in the field, testing them to make sure that they understood what was going on before hitting submit. So it's not only potentially an embarrassing situation for the police officers involved, but also for management, right? Or even the person who implemented the technology. And probably the worst thing is it's law enforcement, which is part of the criminal justice system. So like this is an actual like a document that has potential for being submitted to courts to prove a case potentially. So what do you think? It's just ridiculous, right?
Well, I mean, I've never been a police officer, but I've heard that it could be a hazard of the job being transformed into a frog. So, it's good that we're documenting that.
Yes.
But on a serious note, obviously this is a failure, and the level of oversight was not enough. And I think having a human review of this type of thing is absolutely essential, especially because of the gravity of the situation. If you're making AI generated memes, which is my favorite example, then you don't necessarily need human review. It's fine to just send those out if you're okay with some silly things getting out there. But alternatively, I would say it's important to weigh the costs against the benefits. This was a risk that materialized, inaccurate output that could have had serious consequences. At the same time, I have talked to organizations that are using AI to do real time translations during 911 calls, which is a huge potential benefit, especially because there's a shortage of 911 workers, and especially if it's a language issue, like if somebody's speaking a language that is not common in the US, like
Yep.
if it's not English or Spanish, then it might take a while to get somebody on the phone to speak with that person. So it has the potential to accelerate the response of police and fire and medical personnel. But at the same time, we need to look at the risks carefully. And I think, it all comes down to, in my mind, a quantitative analysis looking at the potential likelihood and impact of the AI system malfunctioning and the converse of not having the system in the first place, and the potential benefits that you might not get if you don't use it.
So if you were the department training officer or whatever that title is, right? So somebody says, "Hey, we want to test this out in the field, see how it's going." What would be your approach to take? Would you do a testing and training in the field, or would you do it kind of like in off hours through very controlled, like, okay, you need to train in, busting into a building and do those types of exercises anyway, so we're gonna set up the AI, train in close to real world situations, but not actually put it in the field. Like how would you approach that?
I would definitely start with a controlled environment like training, if they're doing tactical training or arrest training, things like that. Start there and then compare the results of human generated reports and AI generated reports to understand how accurate they are. And then also, definitely, you're going to need to test in production, so to speak, at some point. So you are going to need to start using it in the real world, but roll it out in potentially lower intensity neighborhoods, areas where there's less violent crime, so that you're less likely to have a serious error be introduced in those situations, and then eventually roll it out to the whole force. I would say in the end, especially in this case, you need to have a human signing off on the results in the end, and that human needs to be accountable for those results. So if a police officer hits sign on a report that talks about him turning into a frog, then there's clearly a problem there. But individual
Right.
humans need to be accountable for the outputs. They can use the tools, but still be accountable for what comes out in the end.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to training personnel uh, to follow a specific procedure. So, for example, if I get pulled over and I'm blasting my music, I automatically turn down my radio, right? Like it's just kind of habit. Like
And if you listen to certain types of music while the AI transcription is going, then the report might talk about a whole range of different felonies that didn't actually happen.
Yeah, gangster rap all the way.
All right. So you want to move on to Manus?
Yeah, go for it.
So as we near or crest the peak of the AI boom, there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions activity, and kind of the most recent one that caught my eye was Meta buying the AI startup Manus. And Manus is based in Singapore but has Chinese national founders, which creates an interesting dynamic because Meta is a US based company. Singapore is a pretty neutral country. They have good ties with the United States, has a big ethnic Chinese population, and these founders are themselves from China. So there's a huge competition going on with the um, United States and China when it comes to AI. And this will be an interesting combination of the different themes that are coming to the forefront right now. So, we're seeing huge activity, huge excitement in the AI sector in the United States. You know, Not to say anything about the founders of Manus, but countries like Russia, like China, have been known to apply pressure to their nationals, whether they're at home or abroad, to do certain things, especially in the technology sector. And it'll be interesting to see what sort of internal controls Meta puts in place with respect to this acquisition to make sure that there's no Chinese espionage or anything like that involved. And then also, I'd be interested to see what the U.S. government has to say about this from a antitrust perspective, from a national security perspective. But looks like it cleared, so it was good to go on our end.
So what does Manus actually like do? Like they're just like work with robots, like the firmware for robots and directions and stuff like that? Are we talking manufacturing robots, or are we talking like walk the dog robots, or like unload the dishes robots?
No, they're less on the robotic side, and they're more on the software side, agentic software. So
Okay.
you can create workflows. You can use plain language to spin up, different types of media, to spin up different types of activities. And it's in my view, it's kind of like a combination of ChatGPT and some other tools like Zapier or N8N or something like that.
Do you know what they were doing that was different than any US company? Like what made them stand out to be purchased for $2 billion? Like what is their differentiator? Is it just offshore location because they want to potentially avoid U.S. regulation? Like, or does regulation not really matter because it is a U.S. based company that bought them and their physical location doesn't matter?
Well, I definitely think that the U.S. regulators, FTC, SEC, would have something to say about this. So I don't think they were trying to skirt the regulations by going offshore. Frankly, you know, uh, I couldn't tell you what the differentiating factor with Manus was. They allow you to leverage a lot of different underlying models. So they let you use Alibaba models. You can use, I think, Anthropic models. You can use a bunch of different things. And if you talk about something like some of the coding apps out there, a lot of them are relying on underlying foundation models to provide the power to the application that sits on top. And I think it'll be interesting to see the degree to which these, not to besmirch them, but wrapper applications add value on top of the foundation models. And OpenAI has been very explicit saying that these things are going to have very limited value in the long run, and that I think I think this is almost a direct quote of Sam Altman saying to those wrapper apps that we will crush you in an economic sense. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Mark Zuckerberg is obviously smarter than me, so he probably saw something worth buying, and he went ahead and he pulled the trigger on it.
Yeah. It's
All
gonna be
right.
very interesting to watch. Yeah, so later on we're gonna talk predictions, and
Yeah.
so that's actually one of my predictions,
Oh,
purchasing.
okay.
But no
Interesting.
spoilers there. Sorry about that.
Yeah. All right. So we'll turn it back to you. Talk about productivity.
Yeah, let's see here. And as soon as I open it up, there's now a paywall, so I'm not gonna try and get around it at all. I'll just share my screen. Um, so this kind of goes to what I was saying earlier, where someone has an idea or they want to create an efficiency or something of that nature. They just blindly think that having AI, large language models, behind the scenes stuff, either or directly in front of somebody that they can use, like, oh, just use ChatGPT for whatever that thing is. It doesn't always work. And I'm really appreciative of the Fortune article because they did experiments and also cited percentages as well as costs. So in this one, you can't actually see it at all. But the story is you have two sets of developers. One of them uses AI powered product, whatever it happens to be. The other one does not. And it ends up that the developer, even with more experience, it takes longer for them if they had not just coded it themselves because you end up professionally knowing the context of the organization, context of the code, what it's actually supposed to do. And not all of that lives in documentation. So you might actually have a model that goes into your code base and it may be able to read it and maybe extrapolate or insinuate like, oh, this is the purpose of the application. The developers who have been at a company for a while and know the context and just experience by itself, like are better off not using any of these tools. Well, I shouldn't say any of these tools. In this case, this particular tool, and it's okay to do some experiments, right? Like, let's see if this helps productivity. Let's see if this answers questions faster, whatever it happens to be. Because as a developer, you may download a new version of code that has a new capability, and you might spend hours trying to figure out exactly what this thing does and at the same time see if there's a business use case for it, right? Does this new API or this new function actually save me time in the long run because now I don't have to do a manual step? So there's obviously trade-offs, and to your point earlier, there needs to be testing, right? Don't just go out there and buy like a $50,000 a month subscription for your 5,000 person organization, right? Just blindly thinking that this is going to be the greatest efficiency thing ever, and we're never going to have to hire anybody ever again, right? Definitely don't do that. Do the research. One of the things I talk about whenever like I give any of my panel discussions or podcasts like this one is if you're looking for an efficiency gain, right? That way your current employees can work faster, right? Like output code faster, whatever it happens to be. Already have a metric. Like have something that you're already measuring. That way throw the tool in there, see if it actually increases in efficiency or if it doesn't, and then walk away from it, right? Because last thing you want to do is implement this thing coding like your senior developers may not even use it because they just realize that it's inefficient. And then the junior developers start using it. They don't have the experience to recognize bad code, right? And at the same time, by not doing the exercise in creating good code, having it peer reviewed, making it better, you're losing out on that critical thinking aspect of it, right? You're just like we talked about before, when somebody outputs something very similar to the police report, right? You have to review it. And sometimes the only way to recognize something of poor quality is to have the experience that goes with that ability. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point about critical thinking. And I mean, it's going to be funny because I'm sure 10 years from now this will be viewed as in my day we used to debug our code manually,
Yeah, we had the Dewey Decimal System, right?
and there are a lot of things that have fallen by the wayside due to technology that we don't use at all these days, and we're probably better for it. I will say I am concerned about the critical thinking side of things because it's so powerful to be able to use AI to quickly execute low value tasks while you focus on the bigger picture, as long as you were able to check the results, as long as you know what should be coming out, and if it's not coming out correctly, the tweaks you need to make, the interrogation you need to do of the process or of the outputs of the AI. And I think it'll be interesting to see how education develops, how training develops, because I think there are a lot of exercises, frankly, that kids have been doing in school for a long time that have zero value, like, write a 5 paragraph essay about this sort of topic. And, frankly, no one in the business world wants to read a 5 paragraph essay when you can read a 5 bullet point email. So, I think it probably trains people to be more wordy than they should be. But with AI, a lot of those what I consider to be silly tasks are going to be completely made obsolete. So I think it's going to be an inherent or incumbent upon educators, upon senior leaders to figure out how to train their juniors to use AI in a way that leverages critical thinking and doesn't try to replace critical thinking.
Tool in support of.
Yeah. And I made a LinkedIn post a while back about vibe coding and how people were saying, "Oh yeah, it's complete garbage and everyone's forgetting how to code." And that's certainly true to some degree, but if you think about it, if you go back in technological progress, before vibe coding, we had no coding and people were saying, "Oh, no code is let's people who aren't technical do all sorts of stuff." And then before no code, we had high level programming languages, and then we had low level programming languages. Obviously, the two work in concert, but in terms of development speed or timelines. And then before that, we had punch cards, and then before that, we had vacuum tubes, and before that, we had stone tablets. So every generation is going to say, well, back in my day, we had to grind out the letters on the stone tablet, and now we get to vibe code. So there's always going to be a new thing, and making sure that you understand the tool and how to use it, I think that's the key.
Agreed, 100%.
Cool. I think that's a good segue to our next topic, which is the impacts of AI on language. And this is definitely something that I noticed very recently. I was walking down the street and I saw an ad in a restaurant for a meal special. And I looked at the image and I said, that was generated from ChatGPT. That's just trademark ChatGPT image generation right there. And then I saw this post on Reddit, which I will pull up here, which I think is really instructive in what's going on. So yeah, I'll zoom in here, and this brought a lot of commentary, but it was about how you know no one seems to care about it. How now radio ads, commercials on TV, the way people talk is reflecting kind of this bland ChatGPT type language, and yeah, and I've even seen some pretty funny videos on YouTube from this creator called Corporate Bro, who, as you might expect, makes fun of corporate America, where he does bits as a human as if he's Chat GPT, and it's really funny. It's really funny. So I think
Add
it's
the add the
definitely
li- add
bleeding
the
in.
link to the chat before you leave. Before
Okay,
we
okay,
leave.
yeah, I'll give a shout out to Corporate Bro in the chat beforehand.
Yeah. So this is
But yeah,
this
go
is
ahead.
very interesting because Crystal and I talk about this all the time, and she thinks, and I point over here because she's over there. She thinks there's going to be a renaissance where people will value the typo. People will value somebody taking the time. Yeah, there you go. In real life renaissance. Yes, there will be a renaissance for handwritten things, non um, non-chat GPT written things, right? And it applies to every sector. So marketing, sales, marketing's huge. I'll come back to that one. Security, whatever it happens to be, there's going to be this an increase in valuation of human generated content. And I'd have to 100% agree with her. Like, just look at the Coke ads. Have you seen those? Like the Christmas Coca-Cola ads? Like communication, not just in written form. Like you mentioned earlier, like video, audio, copy, whatever it happens to be, like I really do think there's going to be more value for the human created and or managed content, right? Because she's in marketing, so like she had a big opinion about the Coca-Cola ads, like, and I asked a question, who approved this, right? Like it has to be like somebody from marketing saw it and was like, this is kind of missing the mark because holiday ads are supposed to hit you in the heart, right? And that one didn't. It just looked flat and very RGB-ish, or should I say CMKY or whatever whatever it happens to be. And I'd have to 100% agree. Before I forget, leads me back to LinkedIn. All right, brand name. Insert what they did. So Coca-Cola nailed it with marketing, their new marketing campaign. Insert this is what you thought it was, but it's not that. Coca-Cola nailed it with the marketing campaign, and it's not just about influence, it's about driving innovation. And then bulleted list underneath that that proves the point, some shout outs and some tags and everything else. Repeat that across all LinkedIn posts. I don't know if you do that. I'm sorry if you do, but basically like insert company name, they did something, and it's not what you think. Here's some rocket ships and some targets emojis and then some phrasing, right? Like over and over and over again. And that's why I unfollowed so many people and started like not blocking them, but saying like don't show me this stuff anymore because I got tired of the same old thing every single time and it doesn't work on me. So going back to the Renaissance point, saw a LinkedIn post from somebody where she misspelled the word blueberry. And I was like, that means she wrote it. Like she excuse me, she took the time to type out that post, which to me means it's more valuable because she found value in it. In rent.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I did not see the Coca-Cola ad, although I did listen to a podcast from the Wall Street Journal talking about it. And I think the biggest takeaway from me, and I'm just borrowing this insight from them, is that the audience was not actually the consumers who were seeing the ad, it was the investors, where Coke was telling the investors, we are embracing the future with AI and we're going to use it to cut costs. But the consumers obviously didn't, I don't think it landed well with them, but they were talking to their investors, according to the Wall Street Journal.
Boo, investors.
Hey, I mean,
Sorry,
I
private
hear you.
equity and venture
I hear you.
capitalists.
I hear you. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out for them. Cool. So with that, should we turn to predictions?
Yeah, I haven't actually like so before we started streaming live, I had the idea of doing predictions because we did not do a 2025 recap or anything like that. And like so like this is the equivalent of a resolution, right? So like I
Sure.
predict you want me to start or you already have a list?
You go ahead.
Yeah, I have I haven't even
You're
thought
gonna
about
wing
it
it.
at all.
You're gonna
Yeah,
wing it.
yeah, we're gonna
It was your
freestyle.
okay. I'll go first. So
Oh,
I'll go
okay, go
first.
ahead.
All right. So I've got two main predictions, and they're both focused on the regulatory side of things of AI in the U.S. I think that the Trump administration's executive order on having unified AI governance framework for the US, which just to recap, basically says that they're going to conduct enforcement actions against states that put forward AI laws that unduly regulate interstate commerce or do things that the executive branch believes are not constitutional or violate existing law. I think that's mainly a messaging document, and I probably will probably see one action against Colorado because of their Colorado SB 205 law, which is kind of hilarious because basically all of Colorado has decided that the law is a bad idea to pass, but they can't figure out how to amend it, so they've just pushed back enforcement by 6 months until the middle of this year. So I think we'll see, maybe an enforcement action or two, but not really like a wave of lawsuits from the executive branch on the AI front. And then the second prediction I have is that in the EU, the AI Act is going to turn into the new Brexit, which what I mean there is that Brexit was basically happening for like a 4 year period. It was happening and not happening at the same time. And it was basically, took like 5 years, 4 or 5 years to finally come into effect. And we're already seeing the EU backpedaling on certain things, on the high risk restrictions, on some of the watermarking restrictions or requirements. And then we have yet to see the harmonized standard for the EU AI Act that they decided that ISO 42001 wasn't the right choice, so they're going to make their own. And allegedly, that's going to be done by the end of 2026. End of 2026, which would be, I think 3 years or 4 years after they started drafting that thing. So we're going to see a slow motion, continuous relitigation and relegislation of the EU AI Act over in Europe.
It gets really confusing with all these laws and how they say that this thing's a great idea, and then they decide, well, we created this thing that actually can't be governed or completed, right, as prescribed. And it's going to be very interesting. They're like, no prediction that they might like repeal parts of it that were unenforceable. Like, is that a thing?
Specifically with respect to the EU AI Act,
Hmm.
or well, I they're certainly going to roll back the high risk restrictions because the harmonized standard, which provided a presumption of conformity with the law in certain respects, is not going to be ready until after the high risk restrictions come into force. So there is no harmonized standard as of right now that you could point to say, hey, we're following this. We're presumed to be in conformance. So I think it's kind of ridiculous that companies are put in that position.
Still trying to think of my predictions. I already have one prediction for Renaissance, right? I predict that in schools, so more and more schools are enforcing no devices, which is forcing kids to just have pen and paper or maybe even their laptop or something like that. But then from a networking perspective, you can block things like ChatGPT on their school issued device. So Renaissance in personal life, Renaissance in school life, Renaissance in um, potentially work. So I mentioned that it's those engineers that have X number of years of experience that can be a mentor for the juniors coming in, right? There's some value at the human relationship level where both individuals, both the junior and the senior, or somebody who's even just flat out like learning, let's say in college or high school or whatever it is, there's the human relationship aspect of it where if that's lost and you're basically isolated, that's not a place many people want to be. So I value my like working relationships like like extremely highly. So it's one of those things where I think there's enough, not necessarily noise, and at the same time enough examples of negative outcomes where boy, there was a company last year, 4 days ago or whatever it happens to be. At some point in 2025, laid off 10% of their staff, and then a month later had to recall a whole bunch of them back because they just weren't ready. They had a misinterpretation about the capabilities of AI, and I think as more and more of those stories spread and people start to come down out of the clouds back to reality and say, hey, this thing is cool. It is a tool, but we still need people and we'll still need people for 2026. So they might start instead of like a knee jerk reaction to this thing, do a little bit more planning, right? A little bit more thoughtfulness. That way the cases very similar to the police transcription happen either not at all or less often. Um, that's really it for predictions there. Um, I think people who are thoughtful in their use of AI will thrive. Critical thinking will increase. Levels of competence will increase. And I think those people will be valued at their companies, especially when they're senior and they have a ton of experience to offer that, frankly, ChatGPT just can't do. Just like copying and pasting from regulation, it can't do it. It's not that great. Humans are the best copy and pasters around.
A key senior leader skill is copying and pasting.
I should add that to my LinkedIn skill list. Copy and paste, bro. Like level 5.
Successfully copied and pasted 1,600 lines of the HIPAA legislation.
Yes. Should get a certificate of completion for that one.
I'll endorse you for copy and paste on LinkedIn.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, anything else, Steve, before we break?
No, I think we're good. So we did predictions. Maybe next time we meet, we do highlights from 2025, or like, is it too late? Because it's already the 6th, so it'll be
I
like
think,
February 9th.
yeah, I think February is too late to talk about 2025. People are talking
Yeah.
about 2027 already by then.
Oh, hey, maybe we should do that. Predictions for 2027.
I'll put something on the calendar for December of this year to talk about
Yeah,
27
you bet.
predictions. Cool, man. Well, thanks for taking the time. And to our audience, this is the Deploy Securely podcast. And thank you for tuning in with us. See you next time.